Hi, Jennifer, Stuart here, and I'm so excited to have with me today Elaine Taylor-Klaus. She's a certified coach, author, co-founder of ImpactADHD, and co-creator of Sanity School. She's a sought-after speaker for parents and educators. Elaine provides training, coaching, and support for parents and teachers of complex kids, and we'll talk about that today, around the globe, online, and on the phone. She's a lifelong advocate for public health. Elaine has served on Georgia's Governor's Council for Maternal and Infant Health and as a parent advisor for the American Academy of Pediatrics. She's regularly featured in Attitude and Attention magazines, and she's the co-founder of Parenting ADHD Now, Easy Intervention Strategies to Empower Kids with ADHD. And she's also, on top of all that, the mother of 3 young adults in ADHD family of 5. So, and you can find a ton of information and resources on her blog and website, ImpactADHD.com. So, hi, Elaine, how are you doing today?
Thank you. Hello to you, and thanks for having me here. I'm well.
I'm glad to have you and chat with you. You are a wealth of information and knowledge. I did spend some time reading a lot of your blog posts already, so I know that parents are going to love it if they go over there and learn so much that you have to share. So I think one of the biggest requests that a lot of parents have, whether they're diagnosed ADHD or not, is how in the world do we start understanding our kids from a loving perspective and get them to, cooperate and go along with our requests without having huge meltdowns? How do we start? Yeah, let's start with a big question.
Yeah, let's just solve the meltdown issue. It's really funny though that you say that. We have a course we wrote years ago called Minimize Meltdowns. It was one of the very first things we created because it really is one of the number one issues that parents
all the preschool families are always telling me.
Absolutely. Yes. We ended up with Sanity School, but we started with Minimize Meltdowns.
Okay.
So, what I love about what you're talking about is the notion of coming to this conversation from a joyful, loving place, right? Yeah. And in sort of coaching parlance, because what we do is we teach parents how to take skills from the world of coaching and apply them to parenting. Right? Because this is not rocket science. It's really just good communication.
Sure. And
so the concept that we start with to address that question is the notion of meeting them where they are, right? We often go through this parenting world with a lot of shoulds on our shoulders, right? We have our mom shoulds and our dad shoulds and the teacher shoulds and the community shoulds and the neighbor shoulds, and we sort of should all over ourselves, Yeah. And so when our kids are behaving in a way that's not how we would want them to behave, if they're having meltdowns, if we shift that they should behave to, wow, something's going on, they need my help, right? My kid's struggling, how can I help? If we meet them where they are, what their experience is, and kind of take off those layers of our own, ego and our own, what everybody else is looking at us and all that, and really focus on the child, then we can get curious and figure out what's going on there and begin to help them learn. Because when kids are having meltdowns at whatever age, they're having meltdowns because they don't yet have the developmental maturity to self-manage. They can't, it's not that they won't, it's that they can't yet self-regulate, or they haven't yet learned how, or developmentally they may not be ready to if they've got something else sort of going on for them. And so it's not, if we shift from they can't do this, they've got to stop this behavior, right, which is all about us. Yeah. I need them to stop this behavior.
It's embarrassing in the restaurant,
or in the grocery store, whatever, right? And if we shift it to, this behavior means my child is struggling. What do I need to understand to be able to help them manage it? It shifts everything.
Sure.
Right? Because it shifts from a place of judgment and brings us to a place of compassion.
Yeah,
right?
I love that shift. Instead of they won't, they can't. There's something going on.
And it's not that they won't ever or that they can't ever, right? We're not lowering the bar. We're just meeting them where they are, and saying, okay, here's where they are right now. And this is something they need my help to learn how to manage because they're not ready yet, right? Those three magic letters, yet.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that we could take that then to anything in life, right?
Yes.
Like we're going to learn how to ride the bike or play soccer or read. You're not going to, take a 2-year-old and be like, all right, here, read this novel of Shakespeare, right? You're going to meet them where they're at. Yeah.
Right. And we often, so there are a couple of sort of catch terms or strategies that we teach around this. One of them is to ask the question, is it naughty or neurological? Because a lot of times or metabolic or whatever, right? A lot of times we treat behaviors as if they're naughty, right? They should stop, they can't do this. When in fact, what's happening beneath that behavior is either neurologic or there's something in the body. Maybe they're hungry, maybe they're tired. There's usually a reason. Maybe they're anxious. I mean, there's almost always a reason for the behavior, right? So if we stop labeling them naughty, which is almost like this moral diagnosis, right? Then we can shift to if it's neurologic or metabolic or, if there's then we can do something about it. So it's just a question for us to ask ourselves to reframe and redirect our own approach and our own behavior.
Yeah, no, I love that. Instead of making it that the kid is the issue, it's trying to figure out what is causing the behavior.
Right, right. I mean, a kid's eating a lollipop and they start to scream and you see the bee buzzing around and then on the floor, it's like, they got stung and you're going to treat it. Something's going on. But if there's no sting, there's no wasp, there's no, right, you don't know but that doesn't mean they're not still hurt.
Right.
Or struggling with something. And we just have to be good investigators and figure out what it is. And that doesn't mean interrogators, right? Why are you crying? Why do you, it's just, we have to sort of,
not the same.
That context, it's a little different, right? And I never thought, but it's an interesting distinction, right? We have to sort of understand what's going on. We often tell parents, so in my realm, where we work with a lot of parents of kids with what we call complex issues. Kids who may have or may be suspected to have, may not yet have a diagnosis of maybe ADHD or anxiety or learning disabilities or like dyslexia there are all sorts of things that can cause kids to developmentally struggle with being able to handle themselves. And so we often tell parents to take what we call the 3 to 5 challenge. And that is to look at the child's age, chronological age, and then drop off about 30%, right? And developmentally, let's look at where they are developmentally, not chronologically. We call it take the 3 to 5 challenge. So you got an 8-year-old who's throwing a fit. And whenever I ask parents, so your child is in this area, is 8 going on what? The answer is never 9, right? It's always 8 going on 5 or 6. Okay, if from a maturation perspective, he's really only 5 or 6, are we setting reasonable expectations, right? Or do we need to shift them and meet him where he is and help him grow from there instead of expecting him to take this huge leap? The image we often use is a picture of we have a picture of an 8th grade kid holding a basketball standing next to this giant high school kid.
Sure.
You wouldn't put a 4th or 5th grader on a high school basketball team.
Yeah, it's not fair.
kind of setting him up for failure there. Yeah.
No, I think that's an interesting point too, because I think oftentimes as parents, we want our kids to stay little. They're so cute when they're little, but we want them to behave big, right?
It's a great point.
Right? We want them to behave like little adults, but we want them to look little and cute. So
we want to freeze them, but be able to talk to them like we would talk to our peers.
Right, and make it through a 3-hour fancy dinner at a restaurant
without being fidgety. I can't tell you how many parents I've worked with over the years who have been just liberated by the notion that maybe it's not fair expectation to have their 6-year-old sit through an entire church service on Sunday without something to do. Maybe it's just not a reasonable expectation yet. They can get there, but not yet.
Yeah, no, I think that's great too, that you offer that it's okay that
Yeah.
they behave like kids.
Yes.
Right, and set the expectation correctly. Yeah.
I wrote a piece years ago. I have a big beef about making our kids grow up too fast. I think that we are undervaluing how wonderful it is to be immature,
Yeah.
and what a precious time this is, and how quickly it goes, right?
Right.
And
No, definitely.
you
Yeah.
know,
You can't
they
go
will
back.
grow up and be adults for the rest of their lives, bless their hearts. you know, but they're only going to get to be kids for a window, and I don't want to slow it down, but we also don't necessarily need to accelerate it quite as much as we tend to.
Yeah, maybe just living in the moment, right?
Yeah.
That can be the goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to take you back to the tantrum thing.
Hey, yes. Okay.
This is like the biggest topic for me as a preschool teacher most of the time. All right, so
Yes.
they're in there now. They're upset about whatever's going on, and what do you recommend that parents can do? And I know you talk about using it as a learning moment, right?
Oh, yes. But there's learning and then there's learning. So, and I haven't talked about minimized meltdowns in a long time, but we have strategies for what to do in this scenario when you really need to deal with it, when it has to stop for safety reasons, whatever, and what to deal with it in different ways. But so the strategy I would offer that is the most effective universal strategy for kids of all ages, preschool through high school. It's probably better for preschoolers and high schoolers because they're a lot the same, right? Is called ACE.
Okay.
And ACE stands for acknowledgement, compassion, and then explore your options. So when a child is losing it, okay, the first thing, actually, even before ACE, is we need to understand that if a child is having a fit or a tantrum or a meltdown or whatever you want to call it, their frontal lobe has been hijacked by the amygdala, by the primitive brain.
Right.
So they are not able to be rational or reasonable because a different part of their brain has taken over. They're in fight or flight, right? And as long as they're in fight or flight, they're not going to be reasonable when you say, calm down, or be reasonable, or don't you understand that? Or when you try to explain or anything else, they can't process that information at that time. All they know is that there's a Bengal tiger in the mouth of the cave and they're in danger, right? So we have to understand that once they're triggered, so there's a whole other place to look before they get triggered to prevention. There's prevention and then management, right? So this is a management strategy.
Yeah.
Once they're triggered, nothing is going to work until we help them get untriggered. Okay. So the first order of business, if you will, is to help them calm down. And as I say, you won't help them calm down by telling them to calm down, right?
What?
So yeah, somehow it doesn't work. And you won't help them to calm down if you start becoming hysterical either, right? You have to be calm, and we talk about the difference between real calm and fake calm, right? You have to actually be calm, stay calm. So if you're getting riled up, then the first place to focus is yourself, right? Take those deep breaths, drink some water. Water is the primitive brain symbol that it's safe, that you're at a watering hole.
Okay.
So it doesn't work with tea and coffee, sadly. But it has to be water. So sipping water, taking deep breaths, doing some wall push-ups, whatever you need to do and you need to learn sort of what your strategies are for calming yourself down. We call it reclaiming the brain. So first place to look is, what do I need to calm down and stay calm?
Yeah.
Right. And that's a conversation to have with yourself, not in the heat of the moment, right? To know what your strategies are, know what your tells are, know, do your palms get sweaty? Does the hair on the back of your neck go? Like, what do you notice about yourself and your body when you do start getting upset? So you can recognize it. The sooner you recognize it, right? So first place is to calm down and authentic calm. And then the second is, again, outside of the immediate moment, at another time with your child, anticipate that these events happen, and be able to help your child have strategies that they're able to pull from to calm themselves down, right? One of my kids used to build up blocks and then knock them down.
Okay.
Another one used to like to hit or scream into a pillow. So helping your kids recognize, and you can't do that in a grocery store, obviously, and sometimes you just have to get them out of a situation.
Yeah.
But how you do that is important. You want to get them out with calm and support, not with judgment and anger, right?
Well, and
Because
I think parents struggle with that because I think they
yes.
feel like if they're not coming down and making a point right now, that they're encouraging the behavior.
Right. Right. Well, and they also don't want to be seen as being lenient or not. A lot of that has to do with how they see themselves being seen by other adults.
Sure.
Right. So if we can sort of let go of what anybody else is looking at for a minute and just stay focused, me and this child, what does this child need from me, the adult, right now? Right. That child needs me to stay calm, to model calm, to have had conversations with them about how hard it is to be calm and stay calm and get calm, right? And that's where the ACE strategy comes in, okay? So ACE, the first place is to acknowledge, this is really hard. It's so frustrating. I bet you're really disappointed that you can't have that candy bar in the grocery store, right? I know that you really, really love those sourpuss whatevers, and it's so hard that we can't get one today, right? To really acknowledge their experience authentically. Sure. And have compassion for it, because that's what it feels like to them right now. It feels like the whole world is falling apart because they can't have a Sour Patch doll or whatever, right? And that's a real feeling for them, right? And we tend to be moving on and want to dismiss it. But if we take that moment to acknowledge their experience, like the reality of what they're going through, and feel for it and have compassion for it, then we can get to a place where we can explore options with them and say, and whether it's negotiate or make arrangements for later or whatever. Yeah. I get that it's really, really hard for you. If you've had that conversation in advance, then you can say, you might have an arrangement where if you use do your deep breaths or do some push-ups or, whatever this kid's going to do to calm down, right? Here, drink some water. And I promise when we get out of the grocery store, we'll have a conversation and we'll figure out how to help you. Like if the child feels heard and seen and addressed and knows that you will come back later and have the conversation, they'll begin to trust. It takes a little bit of time to build this trust, right?
Yeah. I love that, because that was one of the things I wanted to chat with you about, is getting into the cooperation mode and away from the shaming, away from you are not, doing this, you are, being too loud here, you're embarrassing everybody, you're hurting, and then the kids, then they don't want to cooperate with you at all, because now you're just you, like you're horrible.
Well, I mean, if you go into brain science, it's basic brain science, right? When you're doing you, first of all, it's all about me, not about the child. Right. And all you're doing is generating this stress reaction. The cortisol is going and flying in their brains, which actually reduces their ability to trust you and reduces their ability to work with you, right?
Grows the tantrum.
And it just blows everything up, right? But if you stay in a place of trust and connection, if they trust you, right, to be on their team, then that actually releases oxytocin hormones in the brain, which helps them stay connected to you and helps them calm down. So, I mean, this is really brain-based.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be, I know you're a scientist, I don't mean to be giving a whole science lesson here, but at the end of the day, what I often say to my kids, their brains aren't cooked, right? Their brains are it's a 25-year time frame for their brains to be fully developed. And even then, there's a lot of neuroplasticity.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very important point, actually. I think for everybody is get to know that we're not dealing with a little tiny adult.
No.
Yeah, it's different.
Even though they think they're little tiny adults, and they don't understand that the brain's not cooked. But it's our job to understand that their brain's not fully developed. And so it's not that they can't, it's that it's hard for them. And our job is to help them learn to manage these and navigate the nuances of emotional life, because what may seem like a catastrophe for them, we know it's no big deal, but it really does at that moment feel like a catastrophe.
Sure.
Right? And if we dismiss it, then they lose trust in us.
No, definitely, because then they feel like their feelings and their thoughts and emotions are not important. They don't matter. So
Exactly.
I'm just going to yell and scream and throw things because that's the only way I can get your attention.
Right. And eventually they do get our attention that way. And so it works for them. And so they keep trying it. Sort of like parents who keep screaming because they realize that actually it kind of works
Right.
in the short term.
Yeah.
But in the long term, you're not generating the relationship that you want with your kid, and you're not cultivating a kid who learns to make decisions.
Right.
So,
yeah. That's just making them afraid of you. Yeah.
Exactly. And trust is a huge piece of this whole bigger picture.
And then, so one of the other things that I like that you talk about is trying to find the child's strong points, their good points. I mean, because I see this with the littles that I work with. Like they want to be pleasing, they want to be good,
Yes,
and they might not make the best choices sometimes, but they really want to overall. So
Yeah.
I don't know how, I mean, what do you recommend for parents to be able to find those good points in that the child that is complex or challenging or?
Well, so I often say that our greatest challenges are usually our greatest strengths, and vice versa. All right. So if you have a child who's stubborn, well, you also have a child who has the potential to be determined.
Yeah.
Right. You have a child who's rude. You also have a child who is has the potential to be an advocate, right, or to stand up for something. For every challenge, there's a strength. And so if we look for it, and oftentimes we do this exercise in one of our programs with parents for this, and some parents really struggle with finding the strengths because by the time they get to these programs, and that's what I would say is, engage early. Early intervention makes a huge difference. So learn how to communicate more effectively with your child when they're young, and will set you up for years and years of really joyous connection and relationship. Right. I have loved having teenagers like nothing else because I have amazing relationships with my kids and them with each other. And so if you have those open conversations early, and I think I just derailed from what we were saying.
Oh, that's fine.
But early conversations and learning how to do this matters, right? So what you were just saying something, and I did derail.
Yeah, well, I was asking about how parents can find their child's good points.
Oh yeah.
So, no, but I think you didn't derail. I think you actually
just a little.
No, but you made a good point, because if we can do that when they're young, and then, I mean, I have a 13-year-old now, and I know when I mention that to a lot of people, they're like, oh, you got that age. But her and I have a great relationship together.
Yes.
So
and it just gets better and better.
Yeah. Now she is like a little adult, kind of. We can have real conversations. Yeah.
Well, and so that's the thing, is to get to know her and who she is, get to know your kids for who they are, and help them figure out that, let them help you figure out what their strengths are, right? Yeah. To be able to acknowledge, you want to be authentic. This is important, right? You don't want to make up stuff, but it's not just, we tend to look at performance and say, well, you're good at math, or you're good at reading, or right? And what I would encourage you to look for is the behavior, the personality kinds of things. Wow, that was so kind the way you talked to your friend, or that was so gentle the way you played with that kitten, or that was like, it was a really sweet thing for you to go hold that door. Like, to really acknowledge who they're being in the world, not just what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I was thinking, so I have my kids do gratitude journals, and they write.
Yep.
But I was thinking the other day, there ought to be a part in them that says something I did that made somebody else happy.
Oh, I love that.
Right?
Yeah. What did I do for someone else today? Yeah.
Yeah. So no, definitely. I think that's very important. Finding the way that they help others and make a positive impact.
Well, and so what that just reminded me of, and it's a bit of a detour, but it's also creating. It's really, really important to create an environment that makes it okay to make mistakes, right? So you're talking about like a journal. So I was reminded of a speech I heard years ago. What's her name? Blakely, the one who created Spanx. And she made, $1 billion industry right, out of nothing. She had no background. She had no experience in fashion, no experience in business, no experience in anything related to it. And when someone, Sarah Blakely, and when someone asked her what she attributed her success to, she explained that her father created an environment in their home that made it okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And so when she had this idea and didn't know anything about it, it never occurred to her that she couldn't do it. Because in her house growing up, her dad would ask the question at the dinner table every night, so what did you fail at today? And it became like, you know, she described she and her brother high-fiving each other, and it became this environment where they learned that you learn by making mistakes.
Yeah.
And so when we see our kids have challenging behaviors, that is their strength manifesting in a different way, and we can redirect it and help them see the opportunity in it.
Yeah.
But not make it wrong to be crying or upset, but to help them, but to know that it doesn't feel good for them to express it that way, and we want to help them learn to express it in a way that feels better for them.
Yeah, no, I love that. I recently interviewed Jessica Joelle Alexander. She wrote The Danish Way of Parenting, and their whole thing, it's similar to what you're saying, just in a different word. They call it reframing. So,
that's a very coaching concept. Yep.
Yes, yeah. So I love that. You know, instead of saying, all right, they're doing this horrible thing. Well, what's the flip side? What's the good thing that can come from that? What is the strength? So. Yeah.
I think probably I have two really great strengths as a parent. One is that I'm a spin master, right? I can take any scenario and reframe it to figure out what I got to learn from it. My computer died this summer in the middle of a major project, and I lost 6 weeks of work. And, you know, and I have to admit I had one really, really bad night.
I'm sure.
But then the next day I was up and again, I'm like, okay, clearly it's going to be better. And I needed to start fresh. And I think that ability to reframe is a powerful, powerful tool. And then the other is not to take anything personally.
Right.
You know, other people's stuff is their stuff, not ours. And part of what happens as parents, particularly with young kids, I think, is that we take their behaviors personally as if they're a reflection of our job as a parent.
Yeah. No,
and the truth is their behavior is their behavior, right?
Right.
It's theirs, and our job is to help them learn how to manage it. But it's not really... it's not our job to fix it or make it perfect it's really not about us. It's really about them.
Well, yeah, because we're not going to be there, hopefully, when they're 30 and 40 years old to guide them all day long.
Right. That would be the dream. And the parents, in my world, a lot of parents are really worried that their kids are going to be living on their couch in their 30s. Right? It's a real fear when you've got kids with all these complex issues, and school is so much harder in today's age than it used to be, and getting through the school system is so hard. We have that, we catastrophize as parents. It's what we do. If they don't follow my directions now, then when they're 17, they're going to be off doing drugs, right?
Right. No, I hear that. Yeah.
We create these stories, and so we need to make up stories that work for us and work for our kids, and try not to make up the stories that are just making things worse and worse and worse.
Well, and the kids are hearing us, whether or not we think they are, talking about that. So if we can say, all right, yeah, like you said, they're having a tantrum, they're stubborn, well, they're going to be very determined. Oh my goodness, you have such a strong will. You're going to be able to do anything you want with that determination.
Right. I used to say to my kids all the time, I love the way your brain is wired. Sometimes it makes me crazy, but I love the way your brain is wired, right? And I think that's it. It's they are who they are, and we have to help them love that and learn to rein it, to direct themselves instead of being terrified that they're on a runaway horse.
Right. Definitely. And then I know one of the other big things you focus on is taking care of yourself as a parent. Right. And I know that is super important. With our first kid, I was like, my whole job is her. It doesn't matter about me in any sort of way. By the time I got to the third, I wisened up to that. It took a few kids. But,
me too. That third one will do it to you, won't it?
All right, here's the lesson. Did you get it yet? Yeah. But so how do you recommend that parents can really, start to focus on that and realize how important that is?
Well, I was laughing with a client on the phone today because, so we teach this course called Sanity School, right? It's a 6-class course, and it goes through this model of the coach approach. And the last module is on self-care for parents.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many parents get through 5 modules and then stop, right? And they don't do the 6th, or they don't want to, or they like. And she was saying she was so excited.
And then stop. Like they see the title and then they're like, "Oh, I don't need to do that."
Yeah, I don't need that.
Okay.
Right, because it's the notion of putting your oxygen mask on first, and parents are resistant. There's this guilt or shame, or I don't even know. Like, I look back to my early years and I know that I was just as guilty of it, right? Like, I was terrible at taking care of myself. And particularly when you have kids with complex issues, you give and you give and give until you just give yourself away, and then you're spent.
Yeah.
And I finally figured out, and this, I don't know if it makes sense or not, but sometimes the way to get parents into self-care is actually for them to see it as something they're doing for their child.
Right.
It's kind of a backdoor way in, but if that's what it takes,
sure.
If you know that go into the gym is what you really want to do, and you're feeling guilty that you work and then you're going to the gym and taking that time away from your child, then know that you're modeling for your child what it means to take care of yourself and to exercise regularly as an adult.
Definitely.
And if you need to do that, to model that at first until you realize that they're going to be happier when you're working out regularly, like whatever the messages are, I think that to tell yourself. And this is an area I struggle with a lot. I have a hard time walking the talk on this one because I love what I do and I'm kind of a workaholic. And I don't always do as well for myself as I know that I could, or whatever, right? Or even that I want to. And I have a hard time wanting to as much as the other things in my life. And so part of it is about getting clear on my choices and prioritizing. But I also think it's about looking at incremental changes. Like, we often think about change as this big thing, and change is big and it's hard. But we don't always need to make big changes, right? Sometimes it's the little changes one at a time that really, it's deciding I'm going to take my dogs on for a 20-minute walk every day. I'm not going to do an hour walk every day, but if I do 20 minutes every day, or 3 or 4 days a week, or like the little things begin to build up, right? And add on to each other. And so I would say that probably the best guidance I can offer on self-care is to look for the little moments. Is it an extra 5 minutes on a phone with a girlfriend, or staying up 10 minutes later reading a really great book?
Sure.
And like whatever it is for you that feels restorative.
Right.
Is to recognize that, rubber bands, have you ever seen a rubber band when you put it around files in an office and you leave it there and then it dries out and it cracks and it breaks? Right? That's kind of what happens to us as parents if we don't release that tension sometimes.
Yeah.
So
I think, in addition to modeling for the child that it's okay to take care of yourself, so that one day when they're the grown-up, they will. It's also, you're not going to be a nice mom, or, if you're totally spent, right? If you have,
right.
the books for the kids, right, about the bucket, right? If your bucket's empty, then you're going to have nothing left to give them.
That's right. Yeah. And that's what I mean. Like, if you have to rationalize it at first by, this is for my child, not for me, fine. I don't care why you do it, right? But take the time to figure out what's restorative to you. I had a client do an exercise where she wrote down all the things that she's doing. She's a very, very busy, active parent, right? Lots of volunteering, lots of work. She wrote down everything that she does, but we put it in 2 columns. One column was what's draining you, and one is what's feeding you, what's nourishing you. And just that, it wasn't that they were so different. Like the activities in both were fairly similar, but there was something about one area that was draining and some that wasn't. And so that helped her look and say, okay, this is the stuff I want to focus on, and this is the stuff I want to begin to let go of. Because even if I want to do it, if it's draining me, it's not serving anyone.
Yeah, no, I like that.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool exercise. Yeah.
I know, and I think we're almost up on our time here, though. But I was hoping, because something I have seen happen with the families I work with is that there's very often, if you have a challenging child, the one parent that is maybe a little more easygoing, and then the other one that really wants to have the hard rules. And so, if you're trying
Yes.
to understand your kids' emotions, I mean, how do you do that when you're the only one?
That's a much longer conversation, as you know, right? And it comes up for us a lot. I think this is a common dynamic in any home,
Sure.
right? We parent how we were parented. We have different notions.
Sure.
And what I would say is that it only takes one parent to turn the ship.
Yeah.
And if you have a child, like we start off talking about meltdowns, if you have a child who is struggling to learn to manage their emotions, and it just starting to see it that way can be really transformative for the child. But if they have a parent they feel like they can trust, even if they're not getting it from both parents at first, if you begin to shift and start taking this sort of coach-like approach with your child, if you begin to communicate differently, your child will start responding, and eventually your partner will notice. And the story that I tell my husband, I'm a coach. My husband became a coach a couple years after I did. And a few years later, I asked him, like, what happened? What changed? And he looked at me and he said, I just couldn't deny anymore that what you were doing was working.
Okay, I love that.
And so it took him a couple of years to get on board the train with me. And there was lots of button heads and lots of challenges along the way. But I sort of stayed the course, and I didn't judge him for not being on board with me. I just kept staying connected to my kids and staying focused on them and what their needs were, and sometimes using the same strategies I was using for them with him, because he was struggling too with feeling disempowered and feeling, like these are real feelings that we're all feeling, because none of us know what we're doing. We're all making it up, right? It's all made up.
Every day.
And it does, exactly. Just when you think you've got it, it's going to change again. So, so the shortest answer I can offer to how do you get on the same page is to bring that acknowledgement and compassion to your relationship with your spouse as well, and try to keep yourself out of the judgment and the reactivity, because it's reactivity with spouses, and there's a ton more that I would love to talk about, but that reactivity is the place that really puts us all into defense mode. And as soon as you're in defense mode, you're not communicating proactively.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, your thinking brain is not
no
cooperating anymore.
Not really engaged. And I will tell you, remember I told you that Minimize Meltdowns was one of the first things we created. And I'll never forget, my assistant at the time called me. She does not have a child with ADHD, or did not at the time. She did not have anybody in the family. At the time, we thought it was a neurotypical family. And she calls me and she says, Elaine, it works. I said, what are you talking about? She said, it worked with my husband. And so she took one of the strategies that she had read, when I was putting this program together, and it worked with how she was communicating with her spouse.
Wow, there you go.
So there you go.
On anybody, yeah.
Because this is not really about kids, or even about complex kids. It's really about how do you communicate in a way that is peaceful and empowering, and really meets people where they are.
Relationship building, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that. Well, I know we're just about up here. I really appreciate all your time, and I always
pleasure.
If people want to come and learn more about all of your amazing information, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, they can come to ImpactADHD.com, even if your kids do not have ADHD. It's a great resource for taking a coach approach to parenting. If you go to ImpactADHD.com/motivation, you can get a free tip sheet download on some strategies and ways to really motivate your kids. And there's lots of other cool, fun, free stuff on the site. About 90% of what we do is free. Our newsletter is just amazing and very succinct. So just come to Impact ADHD, sign up for something. Let us support you in whatever way works for you.
Yeah, no, the stuff that Elaine has on her site is definitely amazing for any any family, any kind of a
Yeah.
child, because I mean, whether or not they have a particular label or not, I mean, all kids are getting challenges at times.
Everybody's complex sometime or another. That's right.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome, and thank you for inviting me. This has been a lovely conversation, and I love the work you're doing. Just the notion of joy and peaceful makes me happy. So thank you.
All right, thank you.